Hi, welcome to the video. So today I'm going to talk about how to figure out the key for a chord progression. Now, this will help you if you're trying to solo over it and you want to know what scales or arpeggios or other things will work with it. It'll help you if you're writing music and you want to figure out whether chords will fit with the ones you've already written, or just analyzing other people's music to understand it better and be able to remember it more easily and relate the songs to each other. So one way the songs are often related, they're in different keys to each other. They'll talk about like a 1-4-5 chord progression, a 2-5-1. So I'll explain what that is. I'll explain what intervals are, and it'll all kind of go hand in hand with that. I'll quickly also explain what chords are in a key in case you don't know that. And throughout this, I will also be talking about the different notes on the neck. If any of those three topics confuse you, I'll put a link up in the corner and in the description of the video, which you can click on to instructional videos specifically on those areas that will go more into depth on those areas. So now keep in mind, I'm showing you how to figure out how they would fit in your standard major and minor keys, which most music's in. But if something's built off an exotic scale using other chords, then this won't apply to that. Or if something's built in a way that the chord progression might not actually fit in a key, maybe intentionally, maybe they're trying to make it not sound so normal, make it sound more atonal and not fit in a key. So there are times when a song won't fit in a key, or in which maybe a simple song fits in multiple keys because it doesn't have enough chords in it to make it fit only in one key. Okay, because a lot of keys have some notes or some chords in common with each other. So if I count through a major scale, just like a C major will do, so C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now instead of counting letters, I'm going to count numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 is the same as the note I started on, the C note. Now if I'm thinking intervals, I'm just going to skip between those different groupings. Like if I go from the C note to F, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be a fourth interval. If I go C to G, that's a fifth interval. Now the chord progression is basically the same sort of thing. If I say a 1-4-5 chord progression, that's me building a chord off of that one note, building a chord off that 4 note, and building a chord with the root being off the 5th. And basically if I do that and I only use notes that are in the key, then I'll automatically end up with a major chord on the 1, on the 4, and on the 5. If I put something like a minor chord on the 4, that would have a G sharp or A flat, which isn't in the key. So to keep with just the notes of in this case, all the natural notes, you have to, on the 1-4-5, it'll always be major. Doesn't matter what key you move it to. If I'm in the key of G, 1-4-5 will be the 3 major chords in the key. So now if I want the minor chords, that would be the ones that are left, the 2, 3, and 6. And then the oddball one is the 7th chord, which is the minor flat 5. So if you ever see minor flat 5 chord, that's a quick way to identify if it's within key and not just being used to create tension or something like that. Then 1 fret higher than the minor flat 5 will be the key you're in. So if it's a B minor flat 5, you're in the key of C. If it's a F sharp minor flat 5, you're in the key of G. Okay. So now, rather than think of the minors though as the 2, 3, and 6, which I think is a little bit harder to remember and visualize, what I'm going to do is put my pinky on the major, go down to where the relative minor is. My first finger will follow there. This is also where you can have a minor pentatonic scale. So if you're looking for an easy way to solo over your key of C major, put down either the natural minor scale or minor pentatonic. Just that distance back, that will always be a relative minor, that same distance back of major and then 3 frets more. So now if I go and plug chords in on that and do them on the same 1-4-5 like I did on the major, that's my 3 minor chords. If you think of them more how they relate to a major, my A minor is my 6, my D minor is my 2, and my E minor is my 3. But just for ease of thinking about it, I'd say think of it as 1-4-5 from the minor, 1-4-5 from the major, and that's easier to think. Okay, so now let's go and apply this and say, okay, we want to narrow down, there's 12 different notes, so I want to narrow down what key a chord could fit in. So if I have a C major chord, remember there's only 3 different major chords in each key. So that C major can only fit in 3 of the 12 keys. It can fit as the root. It can fit as the 4, in that case of the G, or it can fit as the 5 of the F. So it has to always be a 1, 4, and 5 if it's from the major root. Any major chord will be acting as a 1, 4, or 5. Any minor will be acting as a 1, 4, 5 from the minor root. So that narrows it down for even just if I have a single minor chord or a single major chord to 3 keys. Now at that point you could do this, but I wouldn't recommend it. You could just write down the chords in all 3 keys and then compare them to the chord progression and see which one does that fit best in. That's kind of a time-consuming way. So let's try and narrow it down to less than 3 keys. So if I'm going to be playing, let's say there's a couple chords, because again it's a chord progression, not a single chord. Let's say it goes from C to F. So if I play the 3 keys that C is in, which we already did, which is C, G, and F, well, we know C and F is in the key of C. Well, obviously the key of F has an F chord, and we already said it's got a C chord. So if we go G, the other one that has a C, that's G, C, and D. It's got the C, but it doesn't have F. So right there, we've already narrowed it down to 2 keys instead of 3. It's when I have that second major chord put in. If I have a third major chord put in, and it's again staying in key, that third major chord would have to be the 5 chord, and that would basically tell me what key it's in, because only one key would have the same 3 major chords. As far as C, F, and G is only in the key of C. Other ones will have a couple of them in common, G, C, D, but see, this one doesn't have an F, it's got D instead. F, B flat, C has the F and C, but doesn't have the G, it's got B flat. So if you have 3 major chords, and the same thing works for the minor. If I have 3 minor chords, that will only fit in 1 key, those 3 chords. Now it doesn't have to be in any order like this. Let's say I'm playing here and I've got A minor, and then go a D minor, and then go E minor. Well, that's A, D, and E minor. That would have to be in the key of C, because it's in the relative minor A, which is in the key of C. There's no other one that would fit in, just like I showed with the major chords. Now, a quicker way to even narrow it down more is I can get it down to, if I look at the F and G in the key of C, there's only one spot where you'll have a major chord, and then the whole step up will be another major chord. Now, if you're going this direction, of course, the whole step down. So if you have any major chords, they're one whole step apart, then all I have to do, if I have these, is say, okay, well, that has to be my 4 and 5, or it's going outside key for one of them. So then, if that's 4 and 5, my 1 is right here. If I have a here, that's got to be my 4 and 5, I just go above the 4, that's my root, B flat. Okay, so it's in the key of B flat. So you see any 2, and they don't have to be done right after each other, as long as they're still in the chord progression. You know, if I'm doing F and G as at 4 and 5, I could be doing F and then going to C and then going to G, but still there's F and G. So there's, again, 2 major chords are a whole step apart. That tells me what key it's in. 2 minor chords a whole step apart, same thing. That tells me it's the 4 and 5 from that minor root. Or if you want to relate it to a major, it's a 2 and 3 from the major. Either way, I'm just trying to keep it simple, so if we do the same thing in major and minor, I think that's a little simpler. Okay, so that would narrow it down to only one possibility. Now, some things that can throw you off. There can also be sometimes key changes, and sometimes they won't fully define a key. They won't have, like we talked about before, some short chord progressions might fit in more than 1 key. If I'm looking at keys that are similar to each other, meaning like if you look at a circle of fifths, it adds 1 sharp, 1 flat as you go around the circle. So ones that are next to each other only have 1 note different. So if I have the key of G, the only difference between the notes in the key of G and the notes in the key of C is G has an F sharp and C has an F natural. They both have, if I go through the chords, G and C, is in both chords. And then this has A, D, and E. Well, G major has E, A, and B. So they both have E, A minor, and G, C major. So 4 of the 7 chords are the same in those two keys. So if you have a chord progression that just uses those 4 chords, how can you tell which key is in? Well, first of all, it maybe doesn't matter, because you could, if you're soloing over it, you could play either one. If you're trying to create another chord that'll fit, you could go, to a chord from either key. But some ways you can look at it is if you have other guitar parts, a bass part, a vocal part, if they're playing those 4 chords but then singing F sharp or playing that in the bass or something, then you know that's in the key of G. If they're playing F natural, you know it's in the key of C. So look at other instrumentation, and that sometimes can give you a clue on what it's in, and maybe even changes keys. Maybe you have those same 4 chords repeating, but the bass line or vocal line or something else, the first couple measures use the F sharp, the next couple measures use the F natural. Then there's a key change from G to C on there, even though the chord progression didn't change. Okay, let's jump into 7th chords. Here's another easy one to help you out with. If I go through and make these all 7s, the C and F, or the 1 and 4, are major 7s. The 5 will always be a dominant 7, or in this case a G7. The 3 minors will all be minor 7s. And then the 7 chord will always be a minor flat 5, so it'll be a minor 7 flat 5. So as you can see, there's only one dominant 7. So if you're staying in key 100% in the song, and you see a dominant 7, you know that all you have to do is go back a 5th, and that's the major key you're in. And a lot of songs might do something where like 2, 5, 1, that 5 chord, that dominant 7, again gives away that I'm in the key of C. And oftentimes, blues progressions, jazz, rock, metal, classical, 5-1 is a super common progression. Now, you might say, well, I've seen blues songs where they have a 1-4-5 chord progression, they're all dominant 7. Yeah, that's not completely in key on that. They're taking notes outside key to make the major 7s into dominant 7s. And that's perfectly okay, it sounds good. But just realize that you can still tell what key it's in because they're all major chords. Whether I'm doing dominant 7 or a major 7, they're still major chords. So if I know the 3 major chords, I can just ignore the 7, and it's. But realize that when you're doing those dominant 7s, it will change. You have to be a little bit careful when you're soloing over it or doing harmony with it in some fashion, that there are a couple notes outside key on it. But you can still kind of get the gist of the key. It would still be considered, if I'm playing a C7, F7, and G7, it'd still be considered in the key of C. It wouldn't be, something else. Okay. Now, another thing to think about, you might see on the dominant 7 altered chords, meaning like a 7th chord with a flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5, something like that. That's often to create tension before resolving back to 1. Doesn't change anything. It's still dominant 7, so it's still a 5, moving to 1. If you make this into a G9, G11, G13, it's still a dominant 7. You can, for most part, as far as this is concerned, ignore all those extensions, alterations. If it's a dominant 7, then you know what key it's in. Doesn't matter if it's a dominant 7 with a 9th, 11th, 13th, it's still a dominant 7. Okay, so another thing, I think those will help you. There are other ones you could look at, but I don't want to give you too many. For example, if you're playing a minor chord and then you go up to a major, the only place that will fall a half step apart is from the 3 to the 4. So if I'm playing the E minor, which we call the 1-4-5 from the relative minor, but it's also the, when I'm relating to major, it's the 3, the E minor. So if I go from the 3 to the 4, that's a minor half step higher as a major. That would only fit one place in a key, so then you would know that that has to be from the 3 to the 4 chord on it. Unless they're substituting in and doing this 7 to the root and not playing the flat 7, flat 5, and playing it as a regular minor. So you can get into thinking about different things like that, but I think if you just look for the dominant 7, look for the whole step division between them. Or just even if you narrow it down to a couple keys and then you write out those keys and compare, that can get you through a lot of things. Anyways, I think we'll leave it at that. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.